Hollywood loves to sell us legends, but sometimes the biggest legends are actually the loudest disasters. You ever watched a so-called classic from the 1960s and wondered, wait, this is what broke the box office? Well, buckle up. We're digging up the most overhyped, over-budget, and overacted Hollywood misfires that fooled audiences, drained studios, and left critics with migraines. Which iconic stars couldn't save their own train wrecks? And which so bad their memorable flops still haunt cinema history? Let's take the rose-colored glasses off and start counting down.
Cleopatra.
1963. If you ever wanted proof that Hollywood can spend mountains of money and still get a giant, glittering mess, Cleopatra is Exhibit A. Marketed as the event movie of the decade, it almost single-handedly brought 20th Century Fox to its knees, and not in a good way. Elizabeth Taylor, dripping with diamonds and scandal, was front and center, but even she couldn't distract from the production nightmare swirling around her. First, the sheer excess. Cleopatra started with a $2 million budget, then ballooned to an earth-shattering $44 million. That's over $400 million when you adjust for inflation. Imagine burning that much cash and still ending up with a film that drags like an overloaded barge. But the chaos didn't stop at the bank. Taylor's on-set romance with Richard Burton lit up gossip columns, while weather, rewrites, and reshoots stalled filming for years. Sets were built, torn down, rebuilt, and actors were swapped like spare parts. So, was the payoff worth it? Not even close. Audiences were treated to 4 hours of slow-motion palace intrigue, awkwardly delivered speeches, and pageantry so stiff you could hear the costumes creak. Sure, the costumes and sets were jaw-dropping, but somewhere along the way, they forgot to include any sense of excitement, suspense, or heart. The film lumbered along, never letting its stars truly shine or its story come alive. Even critics at the time had no mercy. Reviews called it the most extravagant bore in cinema, and for all its Oscars for design, Cleopatra ended up synonymous with Hollywood excess and bad decision-making. The only thing epic here was the disaster behind the scenes. This is the textbook case of how a blockbuster can bomb by trying too hard to be important. Paint Your Wagon, 1969. Some movies make you believe in magic. Paint Your Wagon makes you question reality, like, who thought Clint Eastwood should sing? Hollywood has always loved a good musical, but in the late 60s, someone decided to hand two of cinema's toughest guys, Eastwood and Lee Marvin, a batch of Broadway tunes and a polygamous love triangle. The result? A $20 million musical so tone-deaf and misguided that it became a punchline before the credits even rolled. Let's break this down. Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry himself, tries to croon, "I talk to the trees," and you can almost feel his discomfort. Lee Marvin, on the other hand, staggers through Wanderin' Star with a boozy charm, which actually fit because Marvin was reportedly hammered for most of the shoot. Add Gene Seberg as the romantic prize, and you've got a love story with all the chemistry of wet cardboard. Behind the scenes, the production was a logistical nightmare, plagued by snowstorms, washed-out sets, and a director who seemed as lost as his cast. The budget exploded, and so did the drama. Instead of box office gold, Paramount got a musical that dragged for nearly 3 hours, padded with forgettable songs, meandering plot lines, and awkward comedy. Audiences didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just leave early. Critics absolutely savaged it. The New York Times called it a big, lumbering bore, and Variety said it was as long as the Oregon Trail and twice as hard to survive. Over the years, it gained a strange cult following, mainly from people who enjoy cinematic car crashes. But if you ever wondered how not to adapt a Broadway hit, Paint Your Wagon is the musical disaster you can't unhear. Valley of the Dolls, 1967. What happens when Hollywood takes a best-selling scandal novel and tries to bottle lightning? Sometimes you get a hit. Sometimes you get Valley of the Dolls, a movie so drenched in melodrama, pills, and bad wigs that it managed to embarrass nearly everyone involved. When it hit theaters, it was hyped as a raw, unfiltered look at the underbelly of fame. But what audiences got was a soap opera on steroids, minus the self-awareness. The plot, adapted from Jacqueline Suzanne's infamous novel, revolves around 3 women in showbiz who spiral into addiction, betrayal, and heartbreak. Sounds juicy, right? Well, the execution is so heavy-handed and shrill that it borders on unintentional parody. Patty Duke delivers Oscar-level overacting. Susan Hayward looks like she'd rather be anywhere else. And Sharon Tate, tragically, in one of her last roles, never has a chance to show her real talent. The dialogue? Every line sounds like it was written by a high school drama club trying way too hard to be edgy. "You know how many times I've had to slap a face just to keep from screaming?" is a real line, and it's not even the worst. Instead of exposing Hollywood's dark side, Valley of the Dolls turns trauma into high camp, all while serving up unintentional laughs for anyone who dares to take it seriously. Critics at the time torched it, and audiences split. Some walked out, while others returned again and again just to watch the beautiful train wreck unfold. Over the years, it's become a cult classic, but let's be clear, people watch this one to laugh at it, not with it. It's a cautionary tale of how a serious movie can trip over its own stilettos and tumble straight into movie history's Hall of Shame. The Oscar 1966. If there's an award for Hollywood movies that completely misunderstand Hollywood, the Oscar takes it, hands down. This is the kind of movie that thinks it's giving you a backstage pass to the cutthroat world of movie stars, but actually just offers 90 minutes of scenery-chewing, overwrought dialogue, and characters you want to slap rather than sympathize with. Even the cast looks embarrassed half the time. The story follows Frankie Fain, played by Stephen Boyd, as he claws his way to the top of Tinseltown by stepping over friends, enemies, and anyone who happens to be in his path. There's blackmail, betrayal, and a level of egotism that would make a reality show producer blush. The supporting cast includes Tony Bennett, yes, the singer making his acting debut, Elkie Summer, and a parade of cameos, from Milton Berle to Joseph Cotten, each more out of place than the last. What makes the Oscar legendary for all the wrong reasons is how desperately it wants to be shocking and insightful. Instead, it just feels sleazy. Lines like, "You're not a man, you're an animal," are delivered with soap opera gusto, and the big Oscar night climax is so over the top it's practically a parody of itself. Critics shredded it, and audiences rolled their eyes. It's earned a reputation as one of the most unintentionally hilarious movies about showbiz ever made. If you want to see a movie try and spectacularly fail to expose Hollywood's dark side, the Oscar is the glitzy, sweaty meltdown you never asked for, but will never forget. Dr. Dolittle, 1967. When Hollywood throws money at a problem, sometimes you get a classic, and sometimes you get Dr. Dolittle, a musical so misguided it nearly sent the entire genre to an early grave. With a budget that ballooned past $17 million a fortune in its day, a star, Rex Harrison, who was reportedly impossible to work with, and animals who upstaged the humans at every turn, this was supposed to be family-friendly box office gold. Instead, it became the punchline of the decade. Let's talk about that production. Filming in England, the cast battled mud, rain, and animal chaos. Animals ran wild on set, and extras got so sick of the chaos that many simply quit. Meanwhile, Rex Harrison insisted on singing his musical numbers live, which was ambitious, sure, but it's also why half the songs sound like he's muttering to himself at karaoke. The story, about a doctor who talks to animals, should have been a whimsical adventure. Instead, it's a bloated, lifeless 2.5 hours. The musical numbers are forgettable, the plot meanders, and the whole thing feels like a chore. By the time Dr. Dolittle sails off to find the great pink sea snail, most audiences have mentally checked out. Despite being nominated for 9 Oscars, including Best Picture, in a notoriously weak year, the movie was a box office dud and a critical punching bag. Even today, Dr. Dolittle is held up as a cautionary tale. No amount of cash, cute animals, or star power can fix a movie that forgot to be fun. If you ever wondered how Hollywood musicals went extinct for a decade, look no further. The Happening, 1967. Before M. Night Shyamalan turned The Happening into a modern meme, there was the 1967 version, a supposed comedy caper that managed to miss every target it aimed for. This is a movie that desperately wanted to be hip, edgy, and oh-so 60s, but wound up being hopelessly out of touch, tone-deaf, and, let's be real, boring. The premise sounds like fun. A group of groovy young rebels kidnap a retired mob boss played by Anthony Quinn and try to extort a ransom, only for the whole scheme to unravel into chaos. With Faye Dunaway in her breakout year and a bright psychedelic color palette, this should have been a fizzy, satirical ride. Instead, what audiences got was a muddled plot, characters you don't care about, and jokes that land with the thud of a dropped bowling ball. The script tries for social commentary, poking fun at both the establishment and the counterculture, but ends up saying nothing. The supposedly hilarious kidnapping plot drags on, never getting crazier or funnier, just more desperate. Even the soundtrack, packed with then-trendy pop songs, can't distract from the feeling that everyone involved was just marking time. Critics called it a total misfire, and audiences stayed away. Today, The Happening is mostly remembered for its infamous title and as a textbook case of Hollywood trying and failing to cash in on youth culture. Watching it now, you'll be left wondering how something so colorful could feel so relentlessly gray. Candy 1968. If you've ever wondered how many movie legends you can cram into a single train wreck, Candy is your answer. Marlon Brando, Richard Burton, Ringo Starr, Walter Matthau. On paper, this is a fever dream of star power. On screen, it's a psychedelic slog through the worst excesses of 1960s Hollywood. Billed as a wild, sexy, satirical romp based on Terry Southern's notorious novel, Candy wants desperately to be a mind-bending, rule-breaking cultural moment. Instead, it's an embarrassment for everyone involved. The plot, and I use that term loosely, follows a beautiful, naive young woman named Candy as she's seduced, tricked, and bounced from one lecherous man to another, each played by a top-billed star, hamming it up to the point of self-parody. The tone lurches from slapstick to surreal to just plain awkward, and by the halfway point, even the actors seem to know they're trapped in a creative dead end. Candy is awash in visual effects and trippy editing, none of which can hide the fact that it's all just a series of disconnected vignettes with no point, heart, or laughs. The satire lands with a dull thud, the sexual politics are cringe-inducing even by 60s standards, and the dialogue is as groan-worthy as you'll find in any so-called cult classic. Critics lined up to bury this one, calling it smutty, pointless, and embarrassingly unfunny. The real magic trick here? Turning Brando and Burton into the worst thing about a movie. Candy is the sort of film that makes you question how something so wild on paper could end up so insufferably dull. If you want a cautionary tale about what happens when Hollywood thinks outrageous casting can save a script with nothing to say, this is it. Casino Royale, 1967. Casino Royale, 1967, is the psychedelic parody that nearly destroyed the franchise before it got its groove back. It's a James Bond movie in name only. Actually, it's 5 movies in one, since the production had 5 directors, a dozen writers, and not a single person in charge who could say, "No, this is a bad idea." What started as a Bond spoof turned into a $12 million circus with Peter Sellers, David Niven, Orson Welles, Woody Allen, and a supporting cast of confused extras. The plot? Impossible to summarize. There's a fake Bond, a real Bond, multiple villainous schemes, psychedelic dream sequences, musical numbers, flying saucers, and a finale that's less explosive climax and more what the heck is happening fever dream. Behind the scenes, Sellers was fighting with everyone. Scenes were rewritten on the fly, and the editing team cobbled together whatever made it to celluloid. The result? A chaotic, nonsensical mishmash. Sure, there are some inspired gags and weird moments, but most of the humor falls flat, and the pacing is punishing. Even die-hard Bond fans struggled to make it through. Critics called it a colossal mess, and audiences left theaters confused. The only thing Casino Royale proved is that you can throw money and talent at a movie and still wind up with a disaster. Today, it's sometimes remembered for its trippy soundtrack and as a historical oddity, but if you want to see how not to make a spy film, or any film, this one's a masterclass in cinematic chaos. The Loved One, 1965. Satire is a tricky beast. Get it right, and you're a legend. Get it wrong, and you're The Loved One, an overcooked, star-studded misfire that's less darkly funny and more just weird. Adapted from Evelyn Waugh's famously biting novel about the American funeral industry, The Loved One had everything going for it. A razor-sharp script, a legendary British director, Tony Richardson, and a cast stacked with old Hollywood icons and scene stealers like Jonathan Winters, John Gielgud, and Rod Steiger. But here's the problem. The movie can't decide what it wants to be. Is it a scathing black comedy, a slapstick farce, a grotesque fever dream? The tone veers wildly, turning every potentially hilarious moment into an awkward cringe fest. Instead of offering up cutting satire, the movie sinks into tastelessness, gleefully poking fun at corpses, morticians, and grieving families, but forgetting to bring any actual wit or warmth. The plot itself is a meandering mess, jumping between characters and subplots until you've lost track and lost interest. Even the usually reliable Winters and Steiger seem adrift, delivering performances that are either way over the top or weirdly flat. Audiences didn't know what to make of it, and critics agreed. The movie had more corpses than laughs. In the end, The Loved One is remembered as a prime example of Hollywood thinking it's smarter than the audience and being proved spectacularly wrong. If you want satire that works, look elsewhere. The Singing Nun, 1966. Only in Hollywood can a true story about a Belgian nun with a chart-topping pop song be transformed into a feel-good musical so bland it's practically a sedative. Enter The Singing Nun, starring the perennially perky Debbie Reynolds as Sister Anne, whose Dominique took the world by storm in 1963. But any hopes for an authentic, emotionally resonant biopic are drowned out by wall-to-wall syrup and the kind of sanitized storytelling that makes Sunday school look edgy. Everything in The Singing Nun is smoothed over: the struggles, the heartbreak, the controversies, replaced by cheerful tunes, beaming nuns, and scenes of Catholic school life that would make even the Vatican roll its eyes. Reynolds does her best, and the songs are undeniably catchy, but there's not an ounce of tension, realism, or even the faintest trace of the real-life tragedy that befell the actual singing nun, who died in poverty after the music stopped. The supporting cast, including Ricardo Montalban as a priest with perfect hair, try to inject some fun, but there's only so much you can do when the script gives you nothing but smiles and platitudes. Audiences flocked to the movie in the hopes of a new Sound of Music, but even the most die-hard musical fans left disappointed. In retrospect, The Singing Nun is a museum piece of Hollywood whitewashing, a movie that scrubs out anything remotely difficult or authentic in favor of a relentless, empty optimism. If you're looking for substance, you'll find more of it in a communion wafer. Hello, Dolly, 1969. If you ever needed proof that more isn't always better, Hello, Dolly is your glittering, overstuffed evidence. This was supposed to be the grand musical spectacle to end all spectacles. Barbra Streisand in dazzling costumes, endless parades of dancers, and sets so elaborate you could get lost just looking at them. Fox threw $25 million at it, a massive sum for the time, hoping to cash in on the fading golden age of musicals. Instead, Hello, Dolly became one of the decade's most notorious box office letdowns. Let's be honest, Streisand sings her heart out, and Michael Crawford is earnest as ever, but everything else is bloated beyond belief. Musical numbers go on forever, subplots multiply like rabbits, and the pacing slows to a crawl. The direction by Gene Kelly, no less, is oddly static, more museum piece than movie magic. Watching it feels less like an evening at the theater and more like being held hostage at a parade. The critical reception was mixed at best. Some praised the spectacle, but most pointed out that underneath the gloss, there's just not much heart or fun. The film's financial underperformance, despite Oscar wins for art direction and score, put the brakes on big-budget musicals for a decade. Hello, Dolly survives today as a relic, a cautionary tale about Hollywood excess. It's proof that even the brightest stars and biggest budgets can't buy genuine joy. Mr. Budwing, 1966. If you thought the 1960s only churned out psychedelic fun, Mr. Budwing will snap you right back to reality by way of total bewilderment. Picture this: James Garner wakes up on a park bench in Central Park. No memory, no wallet, no idea who he is. Sounds like a setup for suspense, right? Instead, you get a psychological drama so disjointed and humorless that even Garner later admitted he couldn't make sense of the script. The entire movie is a parade of identity confusion, cryptic flashbacks, and philosophical monologues. Garner's nameless character stumbles through New York, meeting a succession of women played by Gene Simmons, Suzanne Pleshette, Catherine Ross, and Angela Lansbury, no less. Each encounter dragging him deeper into existential despair and the audience further into a maze of arty pretensions. Scenes shift tone on a dime, from romance to mystery to flat-out melodrama, leaving viewers as lost as Budwing himself. There's symbolism galore: chess pieces, weird hallucinations, sudden bursts of jazz. But all the surreal editing and visual tricks can't save a story that has no stakes, no momentum, and no real payoff. By the time the final revelation arrives, most audiences have long since tuned out. Critics didn't hold back either, calling the film tiresome, pretentious, and so self-serious it circles right back to silly. Mr. Budwing is one of those rare movies that tries to be everything: thriller, drama, message movie, and ends up being a masterclass in missed opportunities. Sometimes forgetting who you are is the lucky option. The Bluebird. Hollywood and the Soviet Union teaming up for a children's fantasy film sounds like the weirdest punchline of the Cold War. But The Bluebird, a long-gestating 60s project finally dumped into theaters in 1976, proves that not even a cast loaded with legends can save a truly misguided movie. Elizabeth Taylor, Jane Fonda, Ava Gardner, and Cicely Tyson headline what's supposed to be an enchanting fairy tale. What they deliver is awkwardness on an international scale. Filmed in the Soviet Union with a Russian crew and American stars, The Bluebird quickly turned into a behind-the-scenes nightmare. Language barriers, culture clashes, freezing sets, and a script that bounces from sentimental to nonsensical at breakneck speed. Taylor, playing multiple roles, seems as confused as the audience. Her line readings are so stiff you half expect someone to check her pulse between scenes. As for the kids at the center of the story, their blank stares say it all. The effects are bargain bin, the dubbing is out of sync, and the atmosphere is so joyless even the magical moments land with a dull thud. Instead of enchanting children, the movie baffled them. Test audiences reportedly cried out of boredom. Critics and audiences alike called it dreary, lifeless, and the longest 2 hours you'll ever spend. Intended as a heartfelt East-West collaboration, The Bluebird became a cautionary tale. No amount of star power, big intentions, or magical source material can save a film that forgot how to feel. If ever a movie needed its own Bluebird of happiness, this was it. So, did your favorite 1960s classic make the list, or did we just trample on your nostalgia? The truth is, even Hollywood's golden age had its fair share of overhyped, overpriced, and overcooked disasters. Which one left you scratching your head, and which flop do you secretly love? Drop your hot takes and movie horror stories in the comments. Smash that like button if you survived this cinematic time warp, and don't forget to subscribe for more myth-busting movie deep dives. After all, sometimes the real story is what Hollywood hopes you'll forget.